Hello, everybody. So, made it to module 8 into the end of the course. We're almost finished now. Just a couple odds and ends. The content we have left is multi-threading and parallel processing. That's the last major learning objective. And when we talk about parallel processing, that will also include streams, which not streams like streaming, right? We saw those buffered output stream. That's the output of a stream is the output of the code. There's a type of a way we can write our code that's also called streams. So we'll see those type of streams, the encode streams, not the file streams. Kind of confusing that we use the same word two different ways, but we'll see that when we get to parallel processing, multi-threading. That's the last major learning objective. It'll go fairly quick. It's very, very easy in Java. Incredibly easy in Java. It's easier than some of the stuff we did in Java the first week. We just hadn't got to it yet. We probably could have covered it then. But Java since the beginning they worked that into the language since the beginning. So it's super easy to do parallel processing and multi-threading. The only thing is the computer is not smart enough to figure out where to split our program up. So a human has to decide what sections of the algorithm can be run on different cores or on different threads, which sections depend on each other and which ones don't. The compiler cannot do any processing. Y'all may have encountered that by now and not realize what you're doing. Like if you hard code a value in, the compiler won't throw an error, but if you come back and put that same value in a variable and then write the same condition, the compiler won't throw the error because the compiler doesn't do any processing. I guess that sentence right there is the one that shows up on certifications and things like that. The compiler can't do any processing. It can't do a calculation. It can only look at the code as is, so it can only find the obvious exceptions. That's the last thing, but before we get to that, is something I like to cover because in all the programming classes I took, going back to when I was a little kid in 1987, I had the first formal instruction on programming. By that time, I was using a DOS-based computer at home. So in 1987, a lot of things were just basic computer usage we count as programming today. Because they weren't all shortcutted to GUIs where we double-clicked on a mouse. The computer I had at home at that time didn't even have a mouse on it. All we had was the keyboard and the terminal emulator, the thing that eventually grew into command. Back in the days of when software wouldn't even fit on one floppy disk, like spell check and save were on different floppy disk for their word processor. So you had to swap out what was in the RAM long before you all started. So going all the way back there, computer classes along the way. Then when I got my computer degree from Ivy Tech, I had a whole bunch of programming classes, never covered there. When I got my degree, there was some programming courses there, it was never covered there. My graduate working this semester, I'm doing applied linear algebra, and half of our grade is this huge programming project. I'm quite certain that it's not going to be covered there. And that's what do we do when the software is finished? Right? Have you ever thought, oh, I need this I need to find an application that does this and went and found the source code for it? You might do that now. Right? You're about halfway through a software development programming, so you know what to do with it. Software development degree, so you know what to do with the source code now. But before that, if you would have even seen source code, probably would have been different. We don't give our end user source code. What do we do when we finish the software? It was never covered anywhere. I had to figure it out from scratch, and a few points were bigger than they needed to be. So I wanted to talk about that. I need to get out. So I'm going to step on back. We will be using the Windows way tonight. My computer in the class is kind of used to that. Did you see that video I sent out, Joseph?
The video? No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, it's something that comes up all the time. You know what I'm talking about, right? Did I explain it in the mail? Where I go to File Explorer on Windows and use the address bar there to open PowerShell or Bash or Command, open terminal basically. It's how to do that on Mac. It's not as straightforward, but it's not difficult. I probably should have made that video years ago. But the question showed up a couple times last week between this class and my online class. I finally got around to making a video. That way, my users can kind of follow that. It's very straightforward. It's like a 5-minute video. It's not very long. Sorry, got distracted. I'm easily distracted. Y'all will probably notice that by now. Oh yeah, so what are we doing when the software is finished? We're going to look at it on the Windows machine. I'll show you the software I like on the Mac. The one thing about it is after we're finished and we go to make the installers, those installers have to be made on the type of machine they're going on. So I'm planning on making an EXE installer. That's the ones that have the wizard where we walk through versus an MSI installer. That's the ones where we just click install and then the whole process runs automatically. We don't get any options or anything. So I'm going to do the EXE, and Mac has similar things. PKG is the one with the wizard where we walk through it. The other installers, like an MSI, you just do one click and the whole process is automated. They're very, very similar. We would just use different software to create them, but the restriction, also on Linux, is we have to use a Windows machine to make the Windows installer. We have to use a Mac to make the Mac installer. We have to use the Linux machine to make the Linux installer. So virtual machines come in very handy, unless you're like me and have a whole bunch of laptops. Instead of multiple screens, I use multiple laptops. I find it very convenient. It works great until I need to copy a link from one computer over to the other computer. It's a little awkward at that point, like to share on a Zoom call or something. But in general, I find it very useful and have multiple computers around. Linux users don't want an installer. Y'all are probably aware of that, right? Linux users are the ones that want the source code, but I almost always try to make one of the installers for Linux, not because anybody's going to ever use it, but just as a little flag to Linux users like, hey, this was tested. I did test this on the Linux machine. You can see from the .dev file that it was tested on a Debian machine, or you can see from the .app that I tested it on Fedora, I think. I have those mixed up. I almost always use Debian. But I use that as just a little sign to Linux users that it was tested on Linux. Yeah, so we'll look at that, making an installer. I do have a preferred one for Mac, but about a year ago they started charging for it. It used to be free. It's not much, but also Apple users are used to paying for software. Like software that's $3.99 is quite feasible to most Apple users. It used to be free, so I do have a preferred one for Mac. I do not have a preferred one for Windows, so we'll just check an arbitrary one.
Oh wait, Chris. What's paid?
The installer, the app, the software that I use to make installers, it does cost money on the Apple Store.
Oh,
They start charging you for it. You can search for others, but that, as far as that goes, I was just going to point at it here in a moment to show you which one I usually use. The process is the same as we'll go through on Windows machine. So if you want to watch what we do on the Windows machine, it'll be very, very obvious when you get to a Mac.
okay.
I still use free ones still. There's some free ones out there, but I haven't seen the free ones. I will go ahead and say it now before we get started in our example, because I'm liable to forget. Really what it is a great big text file. Because an install is a copy and paste, right? So I grab this thing that's on the internet or something, copy and paste that into program file x86, then make a new directory over here to store our temporary files, and copy and paste some stuff in there, and then copy and paste our launcher, the thing that starts our launcher script onto the start menus doing that. So the thing starts there. It's a whole lot of copy and paste. But it takes a computer a few minutes to write that text file. It's not like the ones we wrote in class where the text file is just instantaneously there, right? It's a our common measurement was still zero. Computers store it quick writing text files. So you can just write all the instructions to do it. But if it takes the computer a couple minutes to take that to write that text file, you can probably very quickly figure out how big that text file is. A text file of command prompt instructions or instructions or batch instructions for whichever machine we're installing it on is what it is. So we'll use software to do that. I guess we need a piece of software to work with first. Oh, sorry, I didn't see something pop in the chat room. Yeah, it's a very useful feature, but yeah, there's on that video. You can probably see why it's hard to explain that without a walkthrough, and I almost never log onto my Mac. I am now. I'm logged onto my Mac so I can point out that software. It's one that I've used for years for Mac installers, but last year they started charging $3.99 for it, which isn't bad. $3.99 is not much, especially when you're working as a software developer. The $4 more dollars that you can put as an itemized deduction on your tax return. Because when you're making really good software developer money, you're going to want some itemized deductions on your tax return. The IRS will want a great big chunk of it, an alarmingly large chunk of it. So I guess first off, I should delete my I don't think I've deleted my getting ready example, but I'll just make another one somewhere. So we need some software to install. So I'm jump over here to NetBeans, make a new software. I'll go ahead and create something. Let's like we've been doing in class, I'll go with an AMP project, a Maven or a Gradle would be the same. Because I'm talking about after the source code's done, when we're ready to click that build button. A couple times this semester we've done clean and build because there was an issue, like the first run on a Gradle project, we have to do an initial build so it knows what dependencies to download and things like that. But when we get finished and we're ready for that final build, so I'm just going to do an AMP project just because that's what we've used most often in class. At this point, I'm going to call it Java Application 27 for the point of our development name doesn't necessarily have to match our release name, right? I know what I'm going to call it, but if I gave it that name now, it would be really, really weird. It's based off the prompt, so not going to do anything fancy here. I'm just going to do a little something basically like a hello world. So I'll do the bankroll. This is the stick up. Give me your name and no one gets hurt. Zoom things are in my way. Oh, I did spell it right. Okay, Zoom pictures were completely in my way. And that's a prompt, so I'm going to come back and take out the LN. There's not a shortcut for the print without the line feed in it. So that's just a habit I've developed over the years. So the bank robbery thing, and that's why I wanted to wait to give it a name too, because I was going to call it identity theft. It seemed like a catchy name for a piece of software that matched the bank robbery prompt to get a user's name. Nothing fancy here. You all know this process, right? We need a way to get that. It's coming from the keyboard. Tutorials and textbooks always call the scanner input, but that's not very useful because sometimes we'll have lots of scanners. We need scanners for the keyboard and scanners for the mouse, scanners for the touch screen and scanners for files, all in the same application. So giving them all the same names, not very useful. I like to be specific. We've talked about that before, so nothing new here. We'll just use the keyboard, the default system input for that, and then print out Been a pleasure doing business with you. The bank robber said that in the movie. I can't remember what movie it was. It goes with the bank robber. I'll get the username. And I cannot for the life of me remember what movie it was. It's an old movie, like 60s or early 60s, black and white. But something like that. That gets our software, right? Gets us an application that we can run, and we'll work for the test purposes because we're looking at something else. Oh, should probably grab that input, shouldn't we? I completely skipped a step. String user is keyboard.next line, just in case somebody gives us their first and last name. And we can add that in here, plus user. That prompt just adds the username that we're actually using to add it again. So nothing fancy there, right? I think that was stuff we've seen on the first day, but that's what we're looking at tonight. So enter the name and get our message back. It's like, all right, that's good to go. Our software is finished. We're ready to go. Well, that's not what we get to any users, right? They probably don't have NetBeans running on their computer. Source code's over here. We're going NetBeans projects. I think it's 27 here. And the source code, all these files. We dig through here. We give that to an end user, and they double click on it. The computer doesn't know what to do with it. We know it's a text file, so the computer's trying to open it with a text file. The typical end user might not even know how to finish that. Or if we wanted to give them the class, the actual compiled version would come over here. But again, if we double click on it, it's not something that runs when we double click on it. Where's the finished version? Or you don't know that in most applications, we're going to have lots of files, right? Made a big deal about how what I did on the main method there is actually really bad form. The main method, if you have more than one line in your main method, you should question if you should ask yourself really, really hard if the rest of those lines can be moved somewhere else. Because the main method is not our code. It's not part of our logic. It's something we're required to do. So we want to get out of that requirement as quick as possible and get into our algorithm where we're in control. So there's going to be lots of files there. So then which one do they click on to start it? And that's where the build comes in. So right now we have the build file folder, information about the project, the manifest, the instructions to build it. Everybody looked at that stuff at some point this semester? Maybe in Maven or Gradle as well. But just gone in there and clicked around, see what's there. You'll notice there's a bunch of XML files for the most part. Lots and lots of comments in the generated ones too, so they're good about telling you what they are. So this one's finished, so we need to go ahead and build the final version of this. So if we come up to the project, right click, we can click build. I'm going to go ahead and clean and build so that we get a brand here. Dumps it, anything out of the cache. We don't have any cached information. Just have a build. Whoops. Let me run it here again. That way the output windows, if we just say build, we don't get any output. Or it won't automatically open the output. So let me go over here, clean and build, and you can see there's a little bit there. It built a jar file. The jar it's a zipped folder of machine language files. So equivalent to an exe on a Windows machine, that executable is just a zipped folder full of compiled code. So we have a special one for the jar file that shows us how to run it. And then that's the file that actually runs. And notice it created this dist folder. In Ant, it creates a dist. If you're in Maven, it's target. And if you're in Gradle, it goes into the file folder called build. I guess Gradle has the best naming on that. So Ant, it's in dist, short for distribution, which is also where your Java docs will go. Maven, it's in a folder called target. And on Gradle, it's in a folder called build. But somewhere in there, you'll see this jar file. And that's what actually runs. So if I go to PowerShell, that is the executable. So to run it, we'll have the Java virtual machine. So just Java -jar, and then the name of it, which is a mess. I meant to rename that first. So I'm going to rename this identity theft. Okay. Now our application's finished. We can double click on it, but it doesn't, it runs in the Java virtual machine so quickly that we don't see anything pop up. If I double click on it, you might see a quick flash on the screen. I don't think the video is even going to catch a quick flash on the screen. It runs so quick we can't see anything because it doesn't stay open. But that's our application into a single item, the equivalent of an exe file, of the executable file. So Java virtual machine, and then we add the jar parameter, and then the name of that jar. Identity theft.jar. And you see our program runs that way. And when there's lots and lots of folders, maybe things with external libraries that we had to use, like remember, we had to use that external MySQL library. If anybody did look at some of the stuff in the textbook and give Java FX a try, there's 6 to 9 external libraries, really 6. The other 3 are very, very obscure kind of things that almost nobody ever needs, but 6 to 9 of those things, like that MySQL JDBC file we use. We want all of those enclosed in one thing, everything we need in one package, and then that's what we want to give the end user. But then there's another step that is probably just a good idea. So we don't need all that source code. We'll back up our source code somewhere. So I'm going to copy this over to a new place to make what we actually copy and paste onto the end user's machine. We'll go to documents, and I'll just put it here for now. I'll make a new folder. Called identity theft, and paste that in there. So that's our application that we actually need to get to the end user. But we've talked about this before. Are we really safe to run that on the end user's machine? Right, that's what the containers and eventually CI/CD pipelines were for, so that we as the developers are in charge of all the configuration and stuff. But if this application depended on reading a file, can we trust the end user to not delete that file that we need? Not delete pictures, or start moving things around or changing permissions in the folders on the computer so that our software still has access to all the things that it needs. So what we really want to do is we want to check stuff first. So usually we'll create a batch file for that. Which, yeah, that thing I mentioned, that video I mentioned to Joseph, what I did a moment ago, where I opened PowerShell from here in File Explorer, that's a little more complicated on the Mac. So over the weekend, I did finally get around to making video for that on Mac. So yeah, you have at least one link in our course shell that goes to my channel on YouTube. It's the most recent video on my YouTube channel if you're curious about that. If anybody's also a Mac user and wants to see how to open things from the File Explorer. I started to go into Sublime. I'm just gonna go to the text editor this way. Just make a new file. And we want to run a check before we do it. So I'm going to do it as a batch file. And this is one that is machine specific. So I'll go ahead and create a couple of them. So for a Windows machine, we want a batch file. So I'll give it the same name, identity theft.bat for a batch file. Add echo all. We don't need to see every single line. And then we would do a bunch of checks. So put a comment in here, mark check to confirm all resources are present before running our software. And that's just going to be a bunch of if-else statements. You just Google how to do an if-else in a batch. The syntax is fairly straightforward. If, then you type some stuff in parentheses, then you put an else, no spaces, and then more stuff in parentheses, and type all the stuff there. But just to check and make sure all of the files are there. That way we know it's safe to start our software. It's not going to crash. And you're going to end up with our users thinking we gave them a virus because every time they open the software, it just automatically crashes. We want to avoid that. And then the line to run it. So Java, identity theft .jar file. And then other parameters we might need, right, those command line arguments to pass in. One thing you might, something that's very common is we have software remember the last thing it did, right? So if I hit save here, if I close Sublime and then reopen it, it remembers the last file it was doing. We were using, right? That's the args array of strings we pass in when we launch the program. We just whenever we close it, whenever Sublime closes it, it just has the computer remember, stores a variable on the computer of the last stuff that was open. So then those get passed in as args parameter. Or equivalent in different languages. Sublime was not written in one language as several, but a fairly common thing. So any parameters we need, I think in our case, we need to pause. That way it doesn't just stop after the last message. So just the instructions to make sure it's safe to run our software, I'll add that in the comment as well. Just make sure it is safe to run our software. So we want to do all that stuff. That's really just a bunch of conditions. Just check to make sure everything we need is in place. If we're going to get stuff from the internet, make sure that the Wi-Fi is turned on, or be ready to pop up a message to tell the user immediately that this software depends on internet access. And it looks like the Wi-Fi is turned off right now, or something like that. So and then that one, if I come back over here, is that batch file. That's the sort of thing we double click on. So that's the launcher that we would give to the end user, that batch file. This was never explained in any of the classes I took. They always stopped at the source code. That's why I want to make sure it's clear, because there's some subtleties that take a moment to figure out. Then our software runs like normal. And we get all that stuff. Might need a Linux user to use our software, right? So I'm going to come over here and hit Control-N, make a new file, and I'll save it in the same place, identity theft.sh. So a shell script this time. So we need our shebang, /bin/bash, running from that one, add in a comment, Check to make sure. Same comments. I was copying from over here. Change the comments in. Oh, and then Java's cross-platform, so our instruction to actually run it is still the same. This one, I believe, will pause on its own. To give that a quick check, if I open, not that manager, here, I always install Ranger. Huh. Well, slash. I guess I have to actually go look into the folders and don't have good views. So mount C/users/print/ documents. And Linux is case sensitive. That's the thing I was hoping Ranger would point out for me. Oh yeah. As if I hadn't just typed the name of that folder 5 or 6 times. So now that we're in that same folder, over here to start that, we would need to change permission. So change mode. Actually, let me list it out -L. Right now, oh, we have full permissions. Okay. Usually we don't have full permissions right off the bat. I don't know why my machine did that. That's actually kind of an issue. We would need to give it permissions. If you haven't seen it before, change mode for change permissions plus X would add executable permissions. But what it is we have 3 bits. Everybody remember 3 bits in binary? We have starting on the right, we have the 1, the 2, and the 4 bit. So we add those together and it's the owner, the group that the owner is a part of, and then public at large. And we can add up, the numbers we can add up 1 and 7. Like 0 means nobody has any permission to do anything, not allowed to touch it. If we turn on the 1 bit is the write permission. If we turn on the 2 bit, that's the read permission, and the 4 bit is the execute permission. So if we set 7, all 3 bits are on, so we can execute. So if we change mode, say the owner gets 7, so the owner can execute, read, and write it. 5 is what I often go with. The group that the owner account is part of can execute it and read it, but they can't write to it. And then the public at large can execute it. Actually, I could put a 4 there. The public at large can execute it, but they can't read the code that's in it, and they can't write it. They can't edit it. I usually go 755. You can also do +X, +XW. It's shortcutted. And then the file name, so like 755 for identity theft.sh. And if we list out with permissions, we already had 755 permissions. So it didn't change anything here. Which I need to look into why I already had that permission. I should not have had that permission. But that's Linux permissions. We have 3 bits and just add up the ones you want. But then at some point it's readable, so then we can say run that file, identity theft.sh. I must have just reset this machine or something. Sudo apt install open JDK. Sorry. 11. Okay, I apparently don't have Java installed on this machine, but then that's what our yeah, that's gonna be a minute. So that's what we would give our end users. And Apple's actually have something similar. On Apple machines, iOS and Mac OS. It's a .command file, but most people just use a .sh, a shell script for the Macs, because it's a lot easier, and then you can use the same one you use on Linux. Also, on an Apple machine, you can put it in a folder called .application, and then Mac will know what to do. Mac will go in there and look for any runnable files like the shell script that launches it. So you don't have to actually type the command to start the shell script. And then you double click on the folder, and those .application type of folders know what to do. Hoping to run that on Linux, but I apparently reset this machine. Maybe the other one's good. How long is this gonna take? Hopefully not too long. It's up to M, so it shouldn't take too long. While that's running, we'll run it again in a second. This is the thing we double click on. If I make that icon large, that doesn't look like a very good icon for our software, right? It doesn't stand out. That's one of the default Windows ones. So here on the batch file and on the shell script, notice that Windows automatically knows what to do on both of them. If we right click that and go to properties, there's only so many things we can change. It's a very specific type of operating system file. So that we can't change just anything to it. This is the one that took me forever to figure out. Way longer than it should have, and I just stumbled across it one day. Is we have this batch file, and that's what we need to give the users to start. And we'd probably put a shortcut to it on the desktop, right? If we make a shortcut and come to properties, this one does have a change icon button right up front. That's the one that took me a while to figure out. I just stumbled across it one day making a desktop thing. It's like, oh, wait, I can change the icon on it. That's how I change the icon for what the user gets. So the user always gets a shortcut to the batch file that checks for resources and then starts our software. That's sort of the process you want to go through whenever you get to the end. That's what users expect, right? Let's make I'm just going to open Paint and make a logo real quick. Because there is one more, might as well go through all the steps here. Not going to take too long. I think I'm just going to draw a couple boxes. So like no outline and maybe a crown sort of fill and put, oh, whoops. Second one's the fill color. And this back to black. Set the fill color to green and draw like some ground, and then maybe another box with watercolor for the sky. That's the sky color. And then maybe some stick. Or brush, that'll work. Maybe not black stick. Just color. The whole nature of what that prompt is. do a stick man that fits with that software we made. This guy's got his hands up. So then this one over here, I'll change to pencil. And this is the guy drawing. There we go. There we go. So a little logo for our software that fits what it does and all that. Something recognizable and unique. Drew the same picture when I was getting ready. Oops. Right here. Then this is logo. Just some arbitrary picture, smiley face or something will work, whatever fits with your thing. But we probably want it to be an ICO file. Unless I can install Java. Let me take a step back and sudo apt install OpenJDK. I did not find that. JDK. Oh, OpenJDK-O. This one will work. Now that there's actually Java on this machine, we can run that shell script now. Hopefully. I remembered like half the command. Okay, well that's running. I'll keep going. I'll come back over here. So with our icon, when we draw something, it's probably going to be a ping file, right? But ping files are very large and have specific purposes and things. So we really want an icon file, a .ico. That's what everything's made to go with. There are lots of online converters. Ping to ICO converter. Yeah. Google should recommend the thing, and you can see right here at the top, there's a whole bunch of them. I think free convert is the one, like, no, that's not the one I was using. That'll work, I'll just use this one. So choose files from device. Upload our logo. The input's a ping, the output's an ICO. It shouldn't take but a few seconds. And then we can save it to the device. So hopefully no surprises there. I guess the point is we need the ICO. We need to change that to an ICO file. Much smaller size. And there are several images here. This one's 72 by 72. Oh, actually, this one's bigger size. Depending on your situation, it could be bigger. There's several images there, so it looks bigger, but it has the 16 by 16, the 32 by 32, the 64 by 64, and the 72 by 72. It says 72 by 72, which is the largest one it has in there. Sometimes we might also have 256 by 256 and 512 by 512. So the actual size got bigger, but we have like 5 images there, depending on how we're going to use it. And then that is what we can make the icon here. So in our shortcut, properties, change icon, and we'll just use that ICO file we just downloaded. Zoom buttons are in the way. Apply, okay. And that's more the process of what we want to go through when we finish the software. So it's really not finished till we've done that, right? Because our end users don't know what to do unless they can double click on something. Here, there's a recognizable icon. Those would probably be organized into different folders and stuff, not all sitting in the same place. So it's more obvious which one it is. And when we double click on that, our application runs. And from all that other stuff, it's safe to run our application. There we go. All right, now I have Java. So oh, that's annoying. So it's supposed to, it should have ran, but the computer can't tell it's compatible. It's like, oh, well, this is Java 17, but it was compiled with Java 20. So it might not be safe to run, but all we did was a scanner and an output. So it would be safe to run, but we have to recompile it and it would take a few steps. But we talked about those steps, right? Any questions about that? Does that make sense to everybody? I would make that all those different ones. Mac OS actually has a .command file. If you're going to sell it on the Apple Store, you probably want to make the .command file. But I don't think they will. It won't fail the test to get on the Apple Store if all you make is a .sh file for the launcher. Most people just do it that way, and then you can use the same launcher for both Linux and Mac. And actually Windows. Oh yeah, I could have just did that. Windows has Linux now, so I did it, and it looks like it looked around at all the different terminals I had and said, oh, this will work with the Git Bash terminal. But our software still works the same, so there it is on a virtual machine. I guess I do need to pause. Yeah, we would still want to pause at the end, but we'll just stick with this one. Make sense to everybody? All that seems straightforward. The thing that goes in the batch file or the shell script is the exact same. The lines that we put in the terminal or the command prompt or PowerShell, the lines we actually type to run the code. But there is still something else we want to do, right? Because how often if somebody goes to install that software and we just give them this folder, are they gonna know what to do with it? That's pretty rare, right? There is some software that does that, but I don't know of any software that does that that isn't intended to be used by programmers. For example, the Godot game engine does that. You just download the zip folder, unzip it, and it runs. Double click on it. There's two files there. One of them is clearly labeled as console. Actually, I have it on here. Nope, not there. Where'd I put it? Oh, right here. So you just download this folder, unzip it, and there's two files in it. One of them is for typing things in the terminal, and the other one is the GUI application. But that's a game engine. That is intended to be used solely by programmers. We usually don't, and every other example I could think of that I've ever encountered is software that is intended to be used by programmers. What we give users is the installers, right? Everybody seen the installers? So we need to make that, which is really just a copy and paste. We want to automate the process of copying and pasting this onto somebody else's machine, which we could do in a great big huge text file, like that batch script we just wrote. but it's very tedious and repetitive and predictable. It doesn't necessarily require any thought to do that. That's the sort of stuff machines are perfect at. It's tedious and repetitive and predictable. And we'll see in a moment that it takes the computer human time scales to write that text file. So it's gonna take us forever. So if you're getting paid by the hour, it'd be worth it, right? If you're somewhere on a development team getting paid by the hour, then you might want to write a text file that takes you a week to write. But humans are gonna make a typo in a text file that big, right? So we're gonna automate the process, and there's applications for it. I did several searches this morning, trying to hone in on something. So something like best apps to create software installers. I did several searches and wasn't really finding many good things. Here's a top 5 list. I believe everybody's heard me say it before, right? My recommendation is always check the top 5, top 10 best of list or blogs, and then you can read through and get an idea of what you should be looking for in that type of software. For the Windows ones, I've never really found one that I just really like and would recommend above others. I used Advanced Installer in the Get class over the summer, so I'll use this one again. I've seen the buttons, but I arbitrarily downloaded it in that class when we did this lecture and was looking through the buttons, and I definitely didn't memorize it. So I'm gonna go to Advanced Installer. We can see kind of what stuff looked like. Free trial, maybe that's not what it was. Maybe that's not the one I used over the summer. Nullsoft has been around for a long time. It's not free software. This is generally one of the best ones, but it's not free. First thing I looked at this morning, we're gonna check another best of list. Nullsoft, Advanced Installer. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Okay, the picture on their page looked different. So we can download a free trial of this. Yeah, I'll just start a free trial. Nope. Do not need to fill out this form, so I'm not going to. I'm probably going to delete this software here in a few minutes after class anyway. Download free trial. The button was on the left. While that downloads, I'm going to log on to the Zoom call from my Mac to point at one for Mac users. Whoops, not sign in. Join the meeting, which is not on my recents list here. While that's downloading, I have to stop the screen share because I don't know where the button to get the numbers is while the screen's being shared. So 944 058 69371. While that's downloading, I can point this out for Mac users because, like I was saying, we can make cross-platform software in Java and Python and Lua and C++, but it's a lot of work there. We have to manually do all the work to make it cross-platform. In Rust, that's definitely cross-platform. Or a bunch of cross-platform ones, but when we go to make the installer, the thing we just started downloading, those have to be made on the system they're going in. So a Mac installer has to be made on a Mac. Windows machine installer has to be made on Windows. A Linux installer has to be made on Linux. So you want virtual machines or something, and for Macs, I do have a package I would recommend. I do have one I would recommend, but about a year ago, they started charging for it. Go to the App Store real quick. Go to Package Builder. I think you can search for it that way. Make sure you add Builder to Package, because if you just put Package, it will search for all sorts of package tracking things like UPS and FedEx and all of their apps to put on your Mac. Oh, it's $4.99 now. So a year ago they started charging. It was free for a long time. There are some free ones out there, but you would just click this, and I thought I already owned it. I already owned it, but at that point it would be very similar. There are free ones out there. That one builds the .pkg files, which are like the executable installers, the one with the wizard, where we walk through and we can change all the settings and that stuff. That's PKG on a Mac. It's also DMG. Those are the ones we just click on and it opens. Or at most, we get a message that says drag this to the applications folder, and then when we do that, everything else takes over. There is free software as well. Free software to make installers. We're going to put the PKG on there. PKG installers for a Mac. I've been using that one that is no longer free for a long time, but there are still some free ones out there. Or you could probably find some blogs that show you what you need to type and set up all your files to do. It's not that difficult. It's just this one says use product build. It's no longer free. So you might have to dig around if you want a free one. But you can see the price here on the Apple Store. Not super expensive. And I believe it's a lifetime license, so it's not $4.99 a year, it's $4.99 forever. And you do not have to install Xcode with that. What else can that? There's also some stuff in Xcode that you can use. I don't know if I have Xcode on here. Oh, wouldn't be there. I just did a factory reset, so maybe I do. Oh no, that's on the Apple Store. I'd have to install that. Xcode is Apple's preferred IDE. I probably could have pointed that out a while ago. There is a Mac user in this class, isn't there? Yeah. Whenever you start installing IDE tools, you should come across Xcode, which is free. It's free on your Mac that used to include it, but then a lot of people that didn't know what they were doing would start Googling line by line code to do stuff. And Apple really, really dislikes to do that. They really dislike when experts do that. They dislike when their own employees do that. So they stopped including it, but this is the preferred IDE for Apple. It knows Python, Java, C++, an IDE that works with just about any language you can know that you know, and leans a little bit towards Swift and Python. Has some nice functionality to it. If you're a Mac user and looking for that. So those tools are out there. Search for Package Builder. I've been using that for years because it was free. Oh, does it only have 1 star? I did not look at the review. I've been using it for years and I've been happy with it. It makes the PKG files very, very easily. And it'll be very, very similar to the one we're getting ready to walk through if finished downloading. which it looks like it finished downloading. That is distracting, so I'm gonna log off the Zoom call on the Mac. Because that felt like it was gonna make me dizzy before long. The computer out of my left eye was a second behind the computer out of my right eye. So, yeah, I'll put that for now. You know what I mean? The delay on the Zoom call was, I could tell it's gonna make me dizzy before long. Yeah, so I didn't look at the reviews, but that's one I've been using for years, and it's really easy to use, fairly intuitive. But if you search around, you can probably find something with more. Or if you just go ahead and install Xcode, Joseph, because if you're still planning on using your Mac when you transfer value PUI, that would be an IDE that should take you the rest of the way through that 4-year degree. And it will, you can start learning all the features there. It'll be productive when you, right? Learning the IDE, just like the languages, along with the languages. We've seen that, right? There's a lot of stuff in an IDE. So I need to install this, right? Well, they gave us the installer. So run the installer. And yeah, I think this is the this is an MSI installer. But I'm pretty sure that one, the software itself is to make the EXE installers. The ones that have a wizard, we'll see in a moment. Should just take it a second, but notice how there's not any options we can control. All we have is the one button. Y'all have seen installers before. Shouldn't be any surprises there. Is that doing anything? I can't see anything on the meter. I can't tell if it's doing anything or not. But it'll probably be more than 5 minutes once that installs, so maybe good time for a break, and then we'll build the installer after a break. 10 minutes on good, everybody. Good big head nods in the class. So my laptop says 709. Oh, that's why. I have to give it permission. Okay, now it's doing something. Don't forget to give it permission just in case Zoom decides to hide that box. Okay, we'll take 10 minutes and then we'll build the installer, which is just walking through that software. It's very, very straightforward. Says 709, we'll get back to it at 719. See y'all in just a moment. And hopefully that installer will finish running for you.